My name is Hadassah, but most people know me as Esther. I remember the first whispers. They said the king of Persia had thrown a banquet, not for a week or two, but for 6 months. 6 months of wine flowing like rivers, silk banners in every hall, and tables groaning with roasted lamb, figs, and honey cakes. From the poorest servant to the highest noble, all were pulled into his show of splendor. Even from the narrow streets of Shushan, where dust clung to our sandals, I could hear the music at night, the clash of cymbals, the roll of drums, the laughter of men who had forgotten restraint. My uncle Mordecai shook his head and muttered, "A man drunk on power must always drink more." And then came the decree. One last feast, 7 days for the entire city. Wine was poured into golden cups, each one different, each one gleaming in torchlight. I never entered those halls, but I heard stories of how the king sat on a throne carved of ivory, how his robes glittered with jewels that caught the light like fire. But even kings are not beyond shame. On the final day, Ahasuerus, flushed with wine, sent for his queen. He wanted her to parade before his nobles like another jewel to admire. But Queen Vashti refused. The silence that followed spread faster than fire on dry grass. Vashti's defiance was unthinkable, and the king's pride, pierced before his own court, turned to fury. Advisors counseled him to make her an example. And so, with ink and decree, Queen Vashti was cast aside. That night, as lamps burned low and the city whispered, I felt a chill in my chest. The palace might have seemed far from the home of a simple orphan like me, but somehow, I sensed the tide was turning toward me. When the king's messengers arrived, I did not resist. What choice does a girl have against the will of an empire? My name was Hadassah, but I carried another name too, Esther. Mordecai told me to keep my true people hidden. Not everyone welcomes difference, he said. The palace smelled of incense and polished stone. I had never touched marble before. It was cold, too smooth, like water hardened into rock. They gave me silks to wear and combed oil through my hair until my scalp stung. Days bled into weeks of preparation. Ointments, spices, lessons in speech and movement. I was no longer a girl from the dusty streets. I was a pearl being polished for a crown. And yet, each night, I lay awake, clutching the memory of home. The crackle of flatbread on a pan, Mordecai's steady voice reading from our scrolls, the soft bleating of sheep in the streets. Would I forget all of it here? When my turn came to stand before the king, my knees nearly buckled. He sat high on his throne, eyes sharp, beard oiled and perfumed. My breath caught in my chest, yet he smiled. Out of all the maidens, he placed the crown on my head. The hall erupted in cheers. But the crown was heavier than gold. It was silence, too, the silence of hiding my people, my faith, my name. I smiled, but in the hollow of my chest, I wondered. Had I been chosen for beauty, or for something I could not yet see? Time passed, and I learned to move through the palace like a shadow. The servants bowed, the nobles smiled, but I kept my head low. Then came Haman. The king raised him higher than all others, second only to himself. Haman walked with the air of a man convinced the world owed him its knees. And indeed, the king ordered all at the gates to bow before him. But Mordecai, faithful Mordecai, would not. Word spread quickly, the Jew who would not bow. Rage boiled in Haman's eyes, and soon his hatred stretched beyond one man to an entire people. The decree was sealed with the king's ring, every Jew in every province, from India to Ethiopia, doomed to die. I heard the wails before I saw the ashes. In the streets of Shushan, my people wept, tore their garments, covered themselves in dust. My heart thudded against my ribs, for I was queen, yet also a Jew in hiding. By night, I pressed my face into my pillow and whispered, "Why have you placed me here, God? Am I to feast in silk while my people perish in the streets?" Mordecai came to me at the gate, his clothes torn, his face streaked with grief. His words were sharp, urgent. "Do not think you will escape because you live in the palace. If you remain silent, deliverance will come from another place. But who knows if you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" His words cut me. I wanted to scream that I was afraid. The law was clear. Anyone who approached the king unbidden risked death, unless he extended the golden scepter. My hands trembled. My lips felt dry as sand. That night I could not eat. I fasted, as did my maids, as did my people. Hunger clawed at my belly, but it reminded me of my weakness, my need. Every prayer was whispered through tears. Give me courage. Let me live, or let me die with purpose. When morning came, I rose. My legs shook as I dressed in royal robes. Each step toward the throne room echoed like a drumbeat of doom. If I perish, I whispered to myself, I perish. The hall stretched long, vast, glittering. Torches flickered on marble pillars. The king sat high, his face unreadable. My heart pounded so loudly I feared he could hear it. For a breathless moment, silence. Then, the golden scepter stretched toward me. Air rushed into my lungs like life itself. I touched the scepter and bowed. My words came gentle, cautious. I invited the king and Haman to a banquet. Not once, but twice. Some called it delay. But in my chest, I knew, I was waiting, watching for the right moment. At the first banquet, the air was thick with roasted meats, cinnamon wine, and laughter. Yet my tongue stilled. At the second, I would speak. And so I left the hall that night, heart pounding with both dread and resolve. The second banquet smelled of spice and smoke, torches casting long shadows. The king's mood was light, wine gleaming red in his cup. What is your request, Esther? Even to half my kingdom, it shall be granted. The words clawed at my throat, but I forced them out. If I have found favor, let my life be spared, and the lives of my people. A hush fell. The king's brow furrowed. Who is he? Where is the man who would dare? I turned to the man seated so near, whose pride dripped like oil from his skin. The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman. Gasps, rage, chaos. The king's fury thundered like a storm. Harbona, a eunuch, spoke of the gallows Haman had prepared for Mordecai. And in that moment, Haman's own trap became his grave. I did not cheer. I only breathed, long and heavy, the scent of smoke and fear still thick in the air. Evil consumes itself, I thought. Always. The law of Persia could not be erased. What was written remained written, carved as if in stone. Yet the king placed upon Mordecai's hand the very ring that once sealed Haman's doom. With it, my uncle, my father in every way that mattered, wrote a new decree, that our people might rise, defend themselves, and stand unshaken. Across 127 provinces, the word spread like fire carried on the wind. The day of dread came, yet it was not we who trembled. Instead of mourning, there was victory. Instead of silence, there was the sound of shields and voices lifted in triumph. My people stood their ground, defending their homes, their children, their lives. Enemies fled before them, and where there might have been graves, there was laughter and singing. We marked those days with a feast, Purim, the festival of remembrance. Where ashes once lay, joy bloomed. Where fear had reigned, dancing filled the streets. I looked at Mordecai, the man who raised me, the man whose faith had shaped my own. A man loyal to the king, yet more loyal still to the God of our fathers. He would rather obey heaven than bend to men, even when his life hung by a thread. Now he stood as Prime Minister of Persia, but power had not changed him. His faith, his wisdom, his courage, they were constant. When he saw danger, he did not turn away or wait for another. He became the answer. And I, Esther, once an orphan, once hidden, no longer lived in silence. I see now that I was not placed in this palace for comfort or beauty, but for purpose. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see the dust of my childhood street, still smell the bread baking on open fires. I am that girl still, but transformed. For such a time as this. And maybe you, listening now, are too. Every step of my story was a step in God's greater story. And if the Lord could use me, an orphan girl, hidden in a palace, to deliver a nation, then he can use you, right where you are.